The government has displayed a contempt for ordinary Australians by shrouding this whole operation in secrecy. The Australian reported on the weekend, quote, "The federal government was tight-lipped about the repatriation, with Home Affairs unhappy details of it had leaked before the families were back in Australia," unquote. Bureaucrats in your government are supposedly unhappy that you were told about something that potentially threatens your security. That's a bit odd, don't you think? But never mind, your security is the government's primary concern. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said, quote, "We will always act in a way that keeps Australians safe. That is our objective and that is what we will do," unquote. Just don't expect to be told about it, that's all. Shadow Minister for Immigration Dan Tehan says 2 of the women have husbands still in the camp in Syria and asks, is the plan for them to be brought back as well? It's a good question. He also said another woman earmarked for repatriation had already had her Australian citizenship revoked. If this is true, shouldn't we be told about this? And wouldn't the recent election campaign have been a good time to do that? Tehan added, quote, "The Australian people need to know what the Australian government is up to and how what they are doing is in Australia's national interest." Well, meanwhile, in our public service, time clock punchers are reportedly easing up on crooks coming into the country. The Sydney Morning Herald reports today that, quote, "Federal government agencies have allowed migration agents to keep operating despite repeated warnings about their role in rorting the visa system that is misused by organised crime gangs involved in human trafficking and worker exploitation," unquote. Well, porous borders are like honey to terrorists. 5 Republican United States senators wrote to the Homeland Security Secretary in August saying that the open border with Mexico was giving terrorists an opportunity to enter the US freely. 56 people who were on the terrorist screening database had been apprehended in only 9 months, and they were just the ones who were caught. Might the same be happening in Australia? We don't know. And the secretive nature of the government suggests we are unlikely to find out. But at least we can rely on the justice system. In October last year, the first person to be convicted of leading a terror group in Australia, Abdul Nasser Benbrika, had his application for release rejected. Benbrika led a group of 17 men who in the mid-2000s were planning various terror attacks, including on the AFL Grand Final in 2005. I remember that Grand Final when the Sydney Swans broke a 72-year premiership drought because I was there with my dad and my 2 young sons. How anyone would want to attack such an amazing occasion is absolutely beyond me. Benbrika was convicted in 2008 and sentenced to 15 years in prison. His sentence expired in 2020. But after an appeal from the then Home Affairs Minister Peter Dutton, based on concerns about Benbrika's continued radicalisation and hatred of Western liberalism, he remains at His Majesty's leisure. These are not normal crimes, and the people who commit them are not normal criminals. I hope the new federal government agrees.